Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today I have with me Simon Boyce, who's currently the engineering manager at Google. Now, Simon actually started off his career as an engineer at Mitsubishi Consumer Electronics. Subsequently, he had led innovative consulting, a principal engineer at Live Nation, and of course, right now is the engineering manager at Google. But Simon, can you tell me a little bit more from your perspective, more about your background and how led you to Google?
Yeah, so I started off at Mitsubishi, but then kind of the internet popped off, and I started getting involved with that. I went to a company that was this is at the beginning of the digital to video conversion. The digital production was still analog, and I started at a company called Cinnabase, and
Mhm.
I worked on digital asset management for many years, about 10 years, kind of taking all the studios. I worked with all the studios. I've worked with all the studios, migrating them from analog to digital production. So
Mhm.
built a bunch of post-production systems. After that, I had formed a relationship with some folks, and I had the opportunity to work with them. And we started a consulting company. We got a arrangement with Hilton.
Mhm.
So Hilton, when we started, they didn't have a Hilton on his app. There was a kind of like a mobile app. It had about $700,000 in revenue, and
Mhm.
we formed this company and we built up the system and we took it eventually to I think like $4.6 billion in revenue.
Wow.
After that, hit COVID,
Mhm.
and then we had to downsize. We had about 80 people, and we had downsized to 23. We sold that part of the business to another consulting company, and at that
Mhm.
consulting company, there was someone who was like, "Yeah, you should go to Google. You should go to Google." And I was like, "Okay, let me try it." And I had tried to get into Google about 10 years before, but I didn't take the entrance exam very seriously, and
Okay.
this I did. Took about 3 months to prepare, and yeah, I got in and I did really well, and I made it. And now I am the engineering manager for Google Analytics SDK teams. So iOS
Excellent.
and Android, we're releasing Windows, and we're working on a PlayStation SDK.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
also run ADH, it's Ads Data Hub, which is
Mhm.
a system for essentially doing reporting where companies can join their first party data with Google's data, and they can do lots of things like brand performance, reach, all different types of queries where they can kind of determine the effectiveness of Google Ads.
Excellent. Well, the part of your story that I absolutely can't ignore is the fact that you'd actually took a decision and the leap to drop out of college and pursue actual career and work. So tell me a little bit more about the decision making behind that and what was going through the decision making in your mind at that point.
I think it was I had always had an affinity for development. I
Mhm.
enjoyed it. And I was essentially doing what I loved. I did what I was interested in, and it came with the benefit of being pretty lucrative. For my
Right.
age, I was doing really well, and so I didn't. It was something I loved. I didn't really want to do anything else. I was doing
Mhm.
it, and so I was like, yeah, I don't really need to finish college to do what I'm already doing. And
Yeah.
it's not like I haven't done things. I have taken plenty of classes. I'm a big believer in education. In fact, I actually was one of the people who created a UCLA engineering class called I think it's
Wow.
701, where they essentially go through a compressed design sprint, and we
Very
take a
good.
bunch of different students through this process of creating a solution for something that helps the community. But
Mhm.
so it's like I do have an appreciation for college and everything, but
Certainly.
me, I was doing well, and I just kept on going with it.
And I ask because a lot of people would lack the conviction to do that. I think that it's a very difficult decision to make. It's a path that's not traditional, right? And you have to think a little bit differently to be a different person to be able to do that and take action like that. Now, the first one of the first companies you started, or from your first experiences in business, you were able to take a company to 4.6 billion in revenue. Tell me a little bit more about the business model and what was the starting point of that company.
Well, this was during the kind of everything mobile. Everyone was
Hmm.
building mobile apps. And I had one of the things that has been very useful in my career is forming relationships with teams.
Mhm.
So teams of
Mhm.
people you work with, you don't work with, and you work with them over and over again in your career. And so there
Mhm.
was a team of folks that I had worked with on previously for a company that got sold to Clear Channel,
Mhm.
called Emotion. And I also had a relationship with them as Cinnabase. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I just kept with them, and they were the ones who had the association with Live Nation. Then we went from Live Nation, we went to Hilton.
Mhm.
So I let me make sure I'm getting your question right again. Go ahead.
Yes, so I was curious about what that company was and what the problem you were solving with that particular company that you were able to take to 4.6 billion in revenue.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, we originally were to build the infrastructure for Hilton to have a truly native mobile experience across iOS
Mhm.
and Android. And we also were responsible for building certain features. So we were the pioneers for keyless entry.
Mhm.
So we built out all of the infrastructure technology for keyless entry on a temporary basis with your phone.
Mhm.
We also were responsible for other innovations in the area of
Absolutely.
hotel management. And our goal was to execute the best app we could and to really focus in on designing a experience that people loved. And the app was 5 star. It was constantly 5 star. Everyone loved it. And yeah, I feel like we ultimately did that. But it was really around just execution and executing the best thing possible. And all of us
Excellent.
kind of had real world experience.
Yes.
So we were at the point where it was really about the user and really about
Mhm.
making sure that they enjoyed using the app and they felt as if this was adding value to their lives. And that was the ethos, and we just focused on that for about 7, 8 years.
Very good. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my experience talking to principal engineers. And a lot of them will find a point in their career after being highly technical where they want to dive in a bit more to understanding business outcomes and understanding how to drive real value with their technical work. But what's different about your experience is that you actually dove right into it. And you actually had to understand the gaps in the hotel industry, understand how the user would navigate the interfaces, understand how to make the best use of those experiences with your product. So the question for you is, how do you think that gave you a different lens? Because I understand that you subsequently gone to become leading technical roles after this experience. How do you think you saw your technical work differently when you had this first experience?
I feel like for my whole career, I have to talk a little bit about the fact that being a minority
Mhm.
has had its difficulties, and
Right.
one of the main ways that I have kind of fought against that is always by being innovative,
Mhm.
always thinking about how to move the needle in a way that other people aren't moving the needle. Because I mean, if you have a lot of people focus on one area, it's very difficult to kind of break into that
Add
area.
value. Right.
Yeah, but if you create value in a different direction that no one really knows about, then there's no real way that anyone can kind of get in your way or stop you from being successful. And
Mhm.
so I would go into businesses, I would go, into Fox or something like that, and I would look for an opportunity that was different than what everyone else was working on. And then I would
Mhm.
focus on that. I would build demos, I would build inertia, and then I would work on getting people behind me and involved in that kind of straw man to kind of build
Mhm.
inertia to get the solution moving forward. And I still do
Right.
that. Even at Google, I do the same thing. It's like I'll come up with an idea, a straw man, and then I'll get people involved. I'll loop them in. We'll work together, but we're going down a path that I've kind of already set in place. And
Mhm.
that is always in innovation, always in an area that other people aren't necessarily thinking about.
Right.
And with
And
AI, go ahead.
oh, please, you finish your thought.
And with AI, that has created a great opportunity at Google.
Mhm.
Um, everyone's trying to work it out, and
Mhm.
nobody really knows exactly how to bring true value to business. And so that's provided a lot of opportunity to innovate and to experiment and to build solutions and value that other people haven't really thought through. Because
Mhm.
there's a narrative out there, of okay, you can just go ahead and build anything and it works,
Mhm.
and but that's not the reality for a business. A business can't exist in a non-predictable way. It has to have reoccurring, trustable systems. So how do you actually integrate AI in such a way that you can leverage it, but don't get rid of the fact that you have to be consistent with people's money. You have to be consistent with the trust that you're given.
Very good. And one other concept I want to talk about is about idea validation. As of course, you were an entrepreneur beforehand. You led a successful initiative. You're now an entrepreneur within Google, of course. So you already got new ideas and new ways to add value to the company. How do you validate these ideas? Because you're also across various industries. Because you were first adding value to Hilton in the hotel industry, and of course now you're at Google, and I'm sure you're at different industries. So how do you validate your ideas, especially when your industries are not ones you're fully aware of beforehand?
I think my position at Google is a little different than, say, for example, Hilton. So like this, thinking about GA4F. So Google Analytics is the most widely used analytics product in the world. So, and it's used by all kinds of different companies. Like from that perspective, you're looking at how do I add value to a huge segment? How do I move things forward for everyone? How do I, focus on whatever the value proposition is for us? And it goes down to our kind of our ethos. It's like, what am I trying to do? Who do you love, right? Well, we love the developer. We want the developer's life to be interesting and to be easy. We love advertisers. We have to make sure that metrics and the necessary signals that flow through an app appropriately go to the right place and deliver the necessary value. So a lot of the initiatives that I'm working on right now are around trying to improve their lives and trying to improve their value. And so it's more around a caricature of a person, of a type of person. We're operating at that level for GA4F. For ADH, though, it's slightly different. So we're working with specific customers and they have specific issues. And for that, we're trying to make life easier. We're trying to make the software easier to use. We're trying to make it easier for customers to access the information that they want, to be able to join the data that they care about, for them to get insights that they need. So it's again, I feel like it's at a different level at Google, where we're working at, working with kind of avatars, right? Ideas of people and trying to provide value to them. Now, but to compare that to Hilton, that was slightly different because we were focused on providing value to the customer and allowing them to book as easily as possible, to improve their experience around finding something that was of value to their particular area. So if I'm a casual, we had different avatars. So like casual business person with a family, person that is taking a quick trip. Like we had different avatars, and so we would think about them and think about how we could provide value to them specifically. But it was more within the context of, I'm booking a hotel or I need something temporarily.
A specific user.
A specific user, yeah. So I feel like it's at a different level at Google, but the segmentation is similar.
Right. So we can bring the conversation more towards what you're doing at Google, and a part of what you've been doing is leveraging AI. And my assumption is also leveraging AI in terms of maximizing workloads as well. Is that true, as far as what you're doing at Google?
So I can't talk too much about it, but I'll give you the high level.
Sure.
We're looking to leverage AI to reduce the distance between you and value. The customer system. I mean, Google systems are notoriously complicated. you can definitely get what you want, but they're not as simple as Meta or these other
Hmm.
systems. So we're
Right.
looking at how we can leverage AI to actually reduce that gap. I think
Right.
AI is a great tool that can make it a lot easier for us to use the tools, a lot easier for you to navigate the complexities of Google infrastructure.
Hmm.
And it is value specifically that Google can provide. Like
Hmm.
I can go ahead and write something in AI, you can write it in AI, and you're able to build something that is similar. But where I feel like Google is different is that we have all this information, we have access to all of these backend systems, and
Hmm.
how can we bring those systems to your AI surface in such a way that you are able to actually articulate the mechanics of Google
Hmm.
and in a very easy way. And
Hmm.
we're the only ones who can do that because it's
Very
essentially
good.
articulating what's inside of Google.
Well, then, from a high level perspective, because I know you can't go too in deep with details, where are the limitations of AI? And knowing those limitations, how are you applying, or how can you approach applying to workflows?
So, AI is not completely trustworthy. Um, we spend a lot of time building evaluation tools and evaluating what we write. And, one specific issue that we've run into recently is, you can build a bunch of skills and you can build a bunch of tooling that addresses a particular use case. But as you migrate or you move between models, all of that can break down because
Hmm.
because we don't really have a handle on how those skills are actually interpreted. We wrote a
Right.
skill, we measured an output, and it seemed good, and then we based workflow on top of that. But now you move to a new model, and how what you wrote is interpreted completely differently,
Differently, and then that has a different output.
has a different output.
Right.
So what you find is like, okay, how can we build systems in such a way that we can actually plumb into the value in such a way that we can actually articulate appropriately, but
Hmm.
still provide a consistent experience.
Right.
And
Right.
um, that has that is kind of the area that we're working through right now.
Right.
And
That's the main problem you're solving.
that's the main problem we're solving because it's like if I spend 2,000 hours building a bunch of stuff
Hmm.
for like, Google Gemini 3.1 and then I upgrade to 3.5 and all that breaks, then all of your software is broken.
Right.
So how can you write it in such a way that you get consistency, or how can you build systems in place that you
Hmm.
can gain and upgrade and maintain value across these different versions?
Right. And another perspective about the limitation itself, I spoke to the principal AI engineer at McKinsey, and one of the theses he has is that the limitation actually is where we don't have enough subject matter experts reviewing the workflows that AI is produced to have to be able to do this like at scale essentially, because a single hallucination at a very in a very sensitive industry like finance or healthcare is going to be very costly. So we're
Yeah.
not there yet. We're absolutely not there yet. And I think it was very important to include that perspective that you have about where those limitations are and how that really impacts how you utilize and leverage AI. So to have a concluding conversation about your work at Google, I know that a part of what you do is also have input on the hiring process. So from your perspective, what do you look for in a candidate that can actually have a long-term impact at the company?
So hiring is something I do a lot,
Hmm.
and obviously I'm going to be focused on a particular role and a particular set of skills. If I'm backfilling
Hmm.
some of the infrastructure team, then that's what I'm going to look for. Um, I tend to I tend to look at what the area like. I have a plan. I have a
Right.
plan for my team. I have a plan for what I want to achieve, and I'm looking to essentially staff my engineers in such a way that they can execute against that plan. So
Hmm.
if I want a specialist in infrastructure and pipeline, that's fine. If I want someone who's responsible for UI, that's fine. If I want someone who
Right.
knows AI and I want them to be on top of skills, then I'm going to look for that person. And then
Right.
when I'm interviewing, I really look for people that are easy to get along with, are
Hmm.
independent,
Hmm.
and but have an interest. Like I feel like, there's a lot of people in software that came to it for the money. And
Hmm.
I'm not to say that I didn't too, I did too. But there's a difference between someone who actually loves the work and actually
Yeah.
has an interest in the work versus someone who's just like, yeah, I'm just here to kind of get the check and be at
Right.
a company. And I really look out for that. I look for
Uh-huh.
people that I feel like they have a good personality and they have a love and interest and that are going to be people I can rely on and um, not have to micromanage. That's what I look
Hmm.
for.
Right. And then when you're actually conducting the
Hands-off manager. Yeah.
right, and when you're looking for technical skill itself, where do you place the most value on? Is it their thinking process and their thought process, or is it the results they produce in that particular problem they're solving?
I think it's changed. I think that's changed over the
Yeah.
last couple of years. Before it was like, the role of being exact was much more important than
Hmm.
say their ability to think through things
Yeah.
and to come up with their own plans and to be flexible. I think that that's pivoted. Like being exact is
Wow.
still important, but I'm much more interested in how you think through problems and how you solve problems and how you can articulate the actual machine to get
Hmm.
to a particular goal, because
Yeah.
that is that's much more important now. And you can use AI to get to the goal, you can use other things to get to a goal, but as long as you can get to a goal and you can do it in such a way that you're cooperating well with your peers and with the infrastructure, then that's a good place. That's a good set of skills to have. And that's what I focus on within myself as well.
Love it. Love it. So what I'll do now is go ahead and shift the conversation to a little bit more about you, Simon, on the personal side.
Yeah.
And the first question I have for you is, what is something about your life or about you that you wish more people knew about? It's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question.
so I I have some side projects,
Yeah.
and there's a friend of mine who he's a developer as well. And we were working on this side project. And he goes, I didn't know you were this good. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm pretty good at this stuff.
Yeah.
So like I feel like I really know how to make good software. And people ask me, questions about it and stuff like that. But I feel like maybe it would be better if more people knew about that. I could probably leverage
Okay.
that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just, how to actually create good software and software that actually adds value. I'm pretty good
Yeah.
at that. So, I
Awesome.
mean, from a selfish perspective, that's probably something I would say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Simon, there's probably a lot of changes between you when you were in your 20s versus now. But if you could dilute it to one particular change that you think is the biggest difference between you now and versus you in your 20s, what do you think that change would be?
I think for me, I trust myself much more than I did when I was younger. Um, I I've matured, and I feel like I am now, like, I take people for what they are. Like before, when I was younger, I would maybe like get frustrated with
Hmm.
people because they weren't a certain way,
Yeah.
or I would expect them to be different, or I'd have expectations about how they are. But
Hmm.
now I've got to a point where I take people for who they are, and and I don't really expect more than that from them. And I feel like that has released me from a lot of personal stress,
Hmm.
because you can't really I mean, you can have an image of a way that you want the world, but a lot of pain comes from that when that
Hmm.
doesn't manifest. Like, you can
Hmm.
frustration and anger, but when you just start taking the world for what it is, you're much more relaxed and you are more in the flow, I think. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest difference between when I was 20 and where I am now.
Yeah. And one last question for you is, how do you bounce back from difficulties where potentially things are not working and potentially you ran a company? I'm sure you had many difficult situations going on there. So how do you bounce back?
I have definitely had difficult times in my life where I've made mistakes and things have not gone right, and I've failed.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely there's a time of mourning, where you kind of just like, oh, I'm on myself or whatever, and maybe have some negative thoughts. But typically, I think being an immigrant and
Hmm.
understanding that I have to kind of like nothing's going to really be given to me. I have to
Hmm.
kind of make it myself has always kind of energized me to want to come back and try again and try something different and kind of
Hmm.
reemerge. So I remember there's definitely times in my life where I've made mistakes or times in my life where I you know I failed,
Yeah.
and I think after I get out that small cycle of like I'm just kind of doubting myself, I
Hmm.
get back into, okay, now I need to start focusing and executing and building again,
Yeah.
and that's what's helped me.
Love it. And I can definitely see that there's a stronger work ethic when you have a little bit more to, when you understand the position that you're in. I think that, as you did mention, I think being an immigrant, my parents were immigrants. I think that you have a different kind of work ethic and you have a different kind of requirement of knowing how much more you need to sacrifice to win. So I can really appreciate that perspective you just provided. So what we'll do now is go ahead. I'll go ahead and share a very concise perspective regarding health and fitness, and then we'll go ahead and conclude the podcast with your plans for this year. So the main perspective I would like to provide is really, just looking at any kind of health and fitness approach. The only reason why it would not work, we can start with the biggest problem, is that you can't stay consistent with it long term, right? And one of the biggest problems you can see with that is people who can maybe prioritize an approach that's not suitable for them long term. That's the biggest problem, because otherwise you're going to be following an approach that won't really work with you long term, and therefore you never get the goal and keep these results. So how to avoid that is really restructuring from the root. What is the exact approach you're taking? What I'd recommend is, instead of focusing on an approach that requires you to be in one fixed location like a gym or like a studio, focus on an approach that I can actually can adapt to your schedule, like such as a location independent approach, what you can do anytime anywhere as opposed to one fixed location. And why I keep stressing this is because if you have an approach that adapts to where your schedule goes, as opposed to you making time for it in your schedule, the amount you're able to adhere to that process is significantly higher. And the more you can adhere to the process, the better, of course, results you're going to get. And typically, when it comes to these approaches, it's either you're going to be able to adhere to it or you're not going to. So you have to prioritize it from the root, creating one from the beginning that can actually work for you long term. What I specifically recommend leveraging is something like step count, and I've repeatedly mentioned this, and I still will stand by it, because as long as there's a ground underneath you, you can leverage that specific approach. And I think for 99% of most people, there's a ground underneath you for most of your life. So you should be able to leverage that approach to be able to get there. And this is actually what I personally use to lose over 70 pounds and keep it off. So hopefully it gives a different perspective, and one that could potentially be more easy to adhere to and be specifically for long term. So hopefully that was viable. What we'll do is go and conclude the fitness conversation and then move on to Simon's plans for this year. So Simon, tell me a little bit more about what you have stored for this year, whether that's professionally or on the personal side.
So yeah, this year there's quite a few releases that are on the way that I've been working on for quite a while. I can talk about Google Analytics SDK for Windows.
Okay.
We're releasing that and we want to promote that. We're we're going to be releasing a newer version of ADH, which will have the AI and capabilities built into it. So like these are things I've been working on for a while, and I am very focused on making sure that they're successful. So from a professional perspective, that's basically the rest of the year for me.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, it's my mom's 80th birthday, so I want to have a big party
Wow.
for her in December. So going to do that for her, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, Simon, is LinkedIn a good place to learn more about you, or is there a different place on the internet where people can learn more about you?
LinkedIn's the best place. I actually wrote a couple of articles and things on there, so yeah, LinkedIn is the best place.
Excellent. Well, Simon, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate the authenticity you had on the podcast today. I think these perspectives you also provided were highly valuable about how you decide on the hiring process, how you identify gaps in these industries, and how you drive enterprise value. So I appreciate it. This is Aryan Mohindra and Simon Boyce.